Hello everybody, today part 2 of my Porsche Cayman 987 4.1 litre project. And in this video we've got the car to the good people at Hartech up here in Bolton, and we're going to be stripping down the engine and seeing just how bad it really is. So the aim of today's video is not just for me to find out a little bit more about my car, but also for all of those wondering what exactly goes on here at Hartech and that may be considering having work done themselves, to show you exactly step by step the process that is involved in getting your engine rebuilt. Now, just in case you haven't seen part 1, this is my 987.1 Cayman S. I bought it for just over £4,000 with a diagnosed engine failure. It still runs, it still drives, but it is rather smoky, particularly on startup, and after a little while does develop a rather worrying noise that when the previous owner took it to the Porsche dealer, he was told was terminal. Now, the first thing the guys here told me was that that might not necessarily be the case, and a few people thought that what I have here might not actually be bore scoring. It could instead just be an air oil separator, another element that does fail on these cars, but which is nowhere near as catastrophic. Thing is though, I'm committed to finding out the truth, and so we're going to pull the car apart one way or the other. But I'd invite you all now to place your bets and see whether you think it really is as bad as I'm led to believe, or if maybe actually it's not quite as terrible as we had once thought. Now, first thing that happens when your car comes to Hartech, if you've sent in a whole car, is the lovely Sharon will give it a visual inspection, walk around it and check what the condition of it is. And I don't really want to read the report of this because visually it's passable, but not brilliant. There's a little patch of corrosion over there. These lobster claws are definitely going to be going, and if I can have my wicked way, not this year, maybe not even next year, this car is going to look very different. But for now, it is simply your everyday, average, plain, boring 987.1 Cayman S. In fact, the entirety of the options list is climate control and heated seats. That's it. No Bose, no Sport Chrono, no fancy brakes, fancy suspension. That's it. This is about as basic as a Cayman S can get. But that's fine by me because it is fundamentally a brilliant car, and when it leaves here early next year, it's going to be brilliant-er. Next step, get the car on the ramp and start disassembling. And while this is going on, not only of course are we going to be looking at the condition of the engine, but also all of the components surrounding it, because one of the disadvantages with buying a car that has a known fault is that I have never ever driven it. So we don't really know the condition of the suspension, the brakes, or any of the other important mechanical components. And as we're doing what we're doing, we are going to be building a list of what stuff also needs sorting in that regard. But one of the first things that you need to know about disassembling any Porsche of this era is that after a few seasons of British weather and salt on the roads, all of the exhaust systems tend to become one sort of rather big and joined up mess of metal. And so in best case scenario, getting an engine out of one of these can be done in about an hour and a half. But if it decides it wants to fight, simply getting the thing out of the car can be almost half a day's work. I'm hoping this one's not going to be too bad. Right. Here we have it, the first proof that something is not right with my engine. This is the spark plug from cylinder number 6, which is always prime candidate for bore scoring, and it's nice and black, showing this thing has been burning a fair bit of oil. But that's not really news to me. arrived at 9 o'clock. It is now 10 past 10, according to my lovely NOVE watch, and we have already had the definitive answer. This is a poorly Porsche. We've had a good look, and both cylinders 6 and 5 are showing very, very clear signs of bore scoring. And this is the stage at which, if this were a customer car, somebody here would be donning the black cap and making a very expensive phone call to a customer. Fortunately, we already suspected this, and in some ways this is good news because it means we're not about to pull apart a perfectly healthy car. We do still have to pull the car apart, and that's going to be the next bit and probably the most animated section of the whole ordeal. So I'm going to get out of the way and let the boys get to work. So, ahead of dropping the engine out, Ash is now draining the car of its remaining fluids. But while he's doing that, I thought I'd show you something that I find quite interesting. And that is what would happen had I just ignored the telltale signs of bore scoring on this car, had I simply continued to drive it. Well, if the bore is scored, as is fairly obvious by the smoke coming out the back of the thing, it's burning oil. And oil starvation only ever leads to one thing. And there are a few symptoms of it, one of which is this. Now here is a piston and a rod from a car, and mine when they come out are likely going to look very much like this, with obvious signs of scoring, and this one is actually even cracked. And this conrod here doesn't look too clever anymore. Now, if you know your engines, you'll know that this, and a normal engine would be doing that, but of course we're talking about Porsches, so it is doing that. And what it's connected to is the crankshaft. So, nurse, crankshaft please. Here we have a 3.4 litre crankshaft out of a Cayman S, much like my own. And when you get oil starvation, of course, the surfaces which should be lubricated are no longer. And you will see here signs of heat. In fact, quite extreme signs of heat. This bit of the crank looks like it has been in a fire, because if you have a lack of oil, what you will then have is friction. Friction causes heat, heat causes expansion, and that's not a good thing. We have a brilliant example of what might happen if you are really, really unlucky. Look at that. Now, I'm no expert, but even I know that rod is not meant to be there. So remember, boys and girls, if your Porsche is burning a concerning amount of oil, a little on startup is a normal flat engine thing, but if it's burning a lot or making strange noises, get a bore scope done. It is the easiest and most definitive way of checking if your car has bore scoring. Don't accept any substitute. The guys here have never ever had a misdiagnosis because they do it the one and only sensible way. Look at the thing and then you will know. And hopefully avoid this. Well, it was bound to happen. We've got to just about bang on 12 o'clock now, and thus far she's been treating Ash fairly well, but we have hit an inevitable snag. The air conditioning pipes refuse to separate. It's a classic case of galvanic corrosion. Aluminium and steel leave them together for long enough and eventually they will basically fuse. Now on a good day, apparently the bolts will simply snap and come out. Today is not a good day, and so we're going to have to get a bit more forceful. Well, I'd like to say we asked it nicely and it cooperated, but it didn't. Now, the moment of truth. Time to separate car from engine. Well, there we have it. This is a 3.4 litre flat 6 M97 Porsche engine with 6-speed manual transmission. There are many like it, but this one is mine. It's finally out of the car 3.5 hours after we began, but of course really we've only just started. Next up, we need to disassemble all of this and then take a proper look inside and see just how bad things are. Well, Ash has nearly got all the ancillaries off. We're building up a pile of pieces that have come off the engine here. It's hard to believe that it all at one point did fit together. It's amazing how small it now looks compared to when we first got it out. We've got the alternator, we've got the air conditioning compressor, clutch, flywheel, inlet manifold, and various other pieces too. And we're slowly building a small list of things that we know we are going to want to replace, the auxiliary belt and of course things like gaskets and other sundries and so on and so forth. But I thought I'd take this moment to talk about a few things that I'm not going to be doing. One of the things that's amazing about the world of Porsche, both 911, Cayman and Boxsters, is the incredible variety of aftermarket parts that are available for them. And of course, there are a whole different variety of opinions as to which is the best way to improve the performance of your car. Now, first up, this is going to be a road-orientated build. Yes, I may take it on track at some point, but that's not what I'm making it for. This is going to be, with luck, my summer daily for next year. And so, I am not going to be putting a lightweight clutch and flywheel setup on the car. Sure, for racing it might improve it, but it's just going to make it less pleasant to drive on the road. The same also goes for anything like solid engine or gearbox mounts. We're going to be refreshing those, but to basically OE specification. One of the more controversial items that I've seen discussed in the forums, and a few people have emailed me too, is the inlet manifold. And now, I remind you, the people here at Hartech do a very good trade out of the fact that Porsche did get a few things wrong with their engineering, but they are also quick to praise the engineering that Porsche got right. And when it comes to stuff like the inlet manifold, as far as these guys are concerned, you're not really likely to beat this. And so we are going to be keeping it. As for the exhaust though, I'm weighing up a few different options. The one that's come off the car is still just about functional, but it's fairly crusty and not particularly exciting. It seems to me daft to try and reuse it. So I'm going to put on a new manifold and rear section. That hopefully is going to have some sports cats in the manifold and then probably none in the rear. This is almost the other way around. It's got very, very small cats in the manifold and then larger ones downstream, which actually is probably not the way to do it because cats work their best when they are roasting hot. There's a whole bunch of different choices out there for manufacturer of exhaust, and yeah, I'm still weighing up my options. So if you have an opinion on that, this video is going to be going out fairly soon after I've actually shot it, which is unusual for me, but it means there will be time to influence what it is that I do. We'll be tending to the brakes, of course, as well. And again, I have a few different paths I can take for that. But I do think, given the fact we're going to be upgrading the power, that we should upgrade those too. Porsche brakes are decent, but this car was built for 300 horsepower, not more like 400, which it may well have. More on that in a minute. So yeah, those are just a few of the things that have come off the engine, and we are almost at the stage where we can start pulling it apart. Now, before we do that though, I'd like to take a quick moment to talk about this, which is my car's gearbox. Only this is not the gearbox. This is the gearbox. Yeah, this tiny little bit at the back here is what deals with all of that power and torque. There are 6 ratios plus reverse in here. Now, I don't really understand gearboxes, no matter how many articles I read. To be honest, they are still just magic and witchcraft to me. This bigger section up the front here is the differential. Now, in a 911, because it's rear as opposed to mid-engined, it's slightly differently laid out, but fundamentally, it's all still very much the same. One conversation that we have been having here though, because this is uncharted territory, there is not a single Cayman in Great Britain with the 4.1 litre in it. We're not sure how the car's going to do for traction. A 911 is rear-engined, so has a further to the rear weight bias, and it has fatter rear tyres. And it's trying to get past me right now. But with the Cayman, we honestly don't know. So these by default come with an open differential. Porsche themselves never offered a limited slip diff as an option for the 987 Cayman. They did it for the 911, but not many people ever went with it. And considering Porsche thought that it might be worth doing it for the 911, we think that maybe it is going to be worth doing it for my Cayman. And I'm happy to say we've got a company that are going to help me out with that. Regal Autosport saw what I was doing and kindly got in touch to offer me a trade discount on basically anything I want from their extensive catalogue. And they have parts not just for Porsche but other brands too, from the likes of AST, who do suspension, CSF, who do radiators, WaveTrack, who do differentials, and a whole host of other brands. So why don't you give their catalogue a look and see what you think I should ask them for my build. So, for now, Ash's job is done, and the engine has been handed over to the lovely Lee, the man with the golden hands and the lustrous beard. He is going to be disassembling this and getting rather up close and personal with it. Lee, incidentally, some might know from the Porsche Engine Gurus Facebook group, where these things are often discussed in detail, and if you are a geek and Porsche fan, it's a thing well worth joining. In any case, the first thing he's going to be looking at is the engine's timing to check whether it is present and correct. Now, we're of course going to be replacing many of the components relating to the timing in this engine, but the reason he does it is because he needs to know if this engine is harbouring problems beyond bore scoring. And if the timing is out, that might tell him that he needs to pay particularly close attention to things like bent valves, so on and so forth. Is that accurate and correct? Yep, lovely. So now the cam cover is off, exposing the camshafts and part of the timing gear. And the next thing that Lee will check for is a serial number, which in the case of this car is 6273. Very, very faint, hard to see, but it appears in a few different places. It is here, it is on both of these cam caps here, both of these cam caps here, and on the top two of the rocker cover. Now this has to be the same number for two reasons. First off, to tell you that all the parts are original and as they left the factory, and the reason that it's important is because these are all matched. They're all paired to each other because you're talking about very, very tight tolerances here, and if one of them is out, eventually you're going to have a bad day. Now they say you learn something new every day, and I'm learning a lot today. We've just got the water pump off this car. and I saw it and I thought, oh, lovely, nice metal one. But Lee, who knows a lot more about these things than I do, looked at it and went, no, 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 no. So confused, I said, what's the problem? Surely the metal one's really good. And he said, no. The problem is, if there is anything wrong with this here and it isn't in the absolute perfect precision, it will start to do what it's done here and take chunks out of the block. So, everybody that says, chuck your plastic water pumps in the bin, get a metal one, you've been told. And while that's all going on, over here, bank one has been disassembled. And I have to say, when it all came apart and I finally got to see in the bores, the thing that struck me was the fact that the walls of the cylinder were grey. And this apparently is characteristic of the Locasil material that they are made out of, which is also the same material that basically causes the bore scoring. And if you want to know a little bit more about that, I did a video with the good people at Hartech a few months ago talking about bore scoring, IMS, RMS, and how and why these issues occur. And also now you're seeing why they're quite expensive to fix. We've been here nearly an entire day and we're only just about getting the thing apart. We haven't even got close to putting it back together, and we're not going to on this trip. Now, one reason for that is that these are not going to be the heads that go back into the car. Now, as part of what they do here, they check that all the valves and springs and whatnot are in good condition. And the main thing they're looking for is unnecessary play in the valves, which of course mean that the guides are being problematic or something along those lines. Now, somebody has previously done a little bit of work on this head and it's not been done to precision standards. The manifold's been taken out and put back on badly. But that's okay, because these heads I'm not using. Instead, the lovely people at Slacker Racing over in the USA are going to give me a set of their ported polished heads. What does that mean? Well, they basically work on the airflow inside the head. Why is that a thing? Well, it's important because now the engine is going from a 3.4 to a 4.1. It's going to be capable of shifting an amount of air that Porsche didn't think it was ever going to do. And this means that when you get to the higher end of the rev range, basically, you're no longer benefiting from the increase in capacity. So, to basically let the engine do the best it can, they port and polish the heads, and that means not only will I now get the beefier mid-range torque low down that I was going to anyway, I should get quite a bit more power at the top end. And they're claiming in excess of 400 horsepower, but we will have to wait until next year when we get the car on the dyno to find out if it's going to do that well or not. Fingers crossed, place your bets. Of course, with so many cars and so many engines about the place, it's very, very important and good practice to keep track of everything. So I have now taken temporary ownership of these two shelves, and indeed every engine that comes in here for a rebuild gets its own two shelves on which all of the component parts of the engine are going to be placed all in the exact same position. So when it comes to rebuild time, they know where absolutely everything is. Here in this quality street box, we have all of the buckets from my cams, and yeah, it's well, I suppose the end of the valves. You know what I mean. And yeah, there's a lot in an engine. And there we have it, Bank 2. The scene of the crime, which is, as we already knew, showing signs of bore score very clearly on cylinder number 6, also on number 5, and it's just starting to show through on number 4 too. And yeah, it's pretty definitive. This was no air oil separator just being a bit smoky. This was bore scoring. Not much of it left now, is there? In fact, it's almost down to the size of a completed Mazda RX-8 engine. But it turns out I haven't gotten away with things lightly. It's not just bore score that we have to contend with. There are here clear signs of both RMS and intermediate shaft, aka IMS failure as well. Now, by the time we got to this stage, they're really minor problems, but this car apparently has the trifecta. Lucky me! Slight correction, I haven't suffered IMS failure per se. This car has the larger later bearing, which is the good one. What I have suffered is IMS seal failure, which is not as bad. And now we have the engine almost down to its constituent parts. And what we have here is the crank carrier, which is a kind of unique quirk of these engines. In most, it would just sit in the block, but in here, because of the way they've put everything together and because of the way it's all machined and at different times, this has become a necessity. But and once you actually get down to it, there's not much of it left. But well, we're not here for half a job, so we're gonna finish it off, and then finally we will have an engine disassembled. And so, how exactly does all of this happen then? Well, now we've got it apart, we can show you. This is piston number 4 from bank number 2. Now, on this side, it's all pretty clean and okay, barring a bit of oil, which you'd expect. But this stuff here, this kind of brown stuff, is called ferroprint. And it's basically a plastic coating of sorts. Around here though, you can see that it has begun effectively to peel off. And when that happens, the clearance between the piston and the cylinder wall is compromised. The locker cell cylinders in this have large parts of silicon in them. This will then allow that bit of silicon to be basically ripped out of the cylinder wall, and it will then get trapped in the piston rings, and it will continue to go up and down, like a very, very fine grinding paste, which of course does take a little while to present. But over time, here we have piston number 5, and you can see it's far more advanced, and you can now feel just gently a little bit of scratching on here, and ultimately, always the biggest culprit, piston number 6. There is basically none of the ferroprint coating left, and this is actually now quite a rough textured surface. So yeah, there you go. That is where your bore scoring comes from, and unfortunately there is no solution to fix this beyond a rebuild. And as for how we make sure this never happens again, well, we divulged a few of Hartech's secrets in the last video, but if you want to see how it goes back together better than ever before, make sure to check out episode 3, which will be live early next year. And that, as they say, is that. Car is still on the ramp, engine is in pieces, and the good folks at Hartech are going home, as I am about to as well. So I want to say a massive thank you to all of them. If you have any questions, please pop it in the comment section down below, and I hope you'll join me next year for the really exciting bit when we're going to put it back together and get this thing running. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.